Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's your I'm lucky to be alive story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Car crash. I was a passenger in a Jeep that completely smashed into the ground upside down. I'm short, so I was low in the seat. If I wasn't wearing my belt, I would have been dead. My family moved a lot when I was young because my dad was a very successful chemist. He was headhunted a lot, hence why we moved. We ended up living in a shady part of Trenton, New Jersey. It was the best we could get on short notice. For context, I am mixed but look white. My brother and I were walking to school one morning, and I happened to be looking down the cross streets because we were new. I heard someone yell, "What are you looking at, cracker?" followed by gunshots. We ran all the way to school that morning, and I learned to keep my head down. I got E. coli when I was 2 and ended up spending 2 weeks in the hospital and stopped breathing multiple times. It's a miracle that I'm alive today. Many moons ago, I was living overseas with the Air Force. One weekend in March, my friends and I decided to go get a hotel and visit one of the foreign cities. We booked a hotel, booked tours, etc. Friday rolls around and I overslept, so we didn't go. My disgruntled friends decided to cancel the trip altogether because it was a hell of a drive to get to the hotel and wasn't worth it to go just for 2 nights when leaving so late. That Friday happened to be March 11th, 2011, and the country happened to be Japan. For those uninitiated, that was the date the massive earthquake and ensuing tsunami hit. The city we were going to visit was Sendai. That city ended up being destroyed by the tsunami. The hotel we were going to stay in was wiped away. That could have been us, all because we overslept. I still have the confirmation email from the hotel. I've got 2 and I'll make it short. At 18 on the way home from snowboarding in Vegas, I went to sleep with a seat belt and the driver lost control. I got ejected out the back window. I came out with the least number of injuries out of the 4 people in the car. The car landed about a car length from me. I'm 36 now, but last year I had a heart attack. I called 911 for emergency services to rush me to the hospital. They said they had to be revived 4 times on the way to the hospital. On the table at the hospital, they had to revive me 3 more times while they worked on me. They called my heart attack a widowmaker. Effing moron decided to overtake a bus when I was in the oncoming in the other lane. He had a continuous line, so he couldn't overtake. I suddenly developed nerves of steel and gently and calmly turned the wheel to the patch of grass that became the road shoulder. Dumbass must have hit the brakes hard, because his car was shaking the rear end. I've read that's what happens with forward-wheel drive cars when you brake hard. He blazed past me and went about his stupid business. Luckily, the biker behind me did the same, or he'd get clipped. My passengers were screaming and almost crying, and when the commotion stopped, I came back to myself and started shaking a lot. I had the urge to cry, but held it. I wanted to ask if the biker was okay, but I couldn't speak. I drove like 3 kilometers like this before I snapped out of it. I never want to be put to the test like this again. Youngsters may think it's cool to prove yourself a good driver, but it's not. It sucks. Thank God nothing like this ever happened again. I blacked out while driving and hit a telephone pole. It was a small pole next to the train tracks. It fell over and the power line attached to it detached. My Jeep rolled over. I was trapped in my car for an hour until they could turn the power off to get me. If my Jeep had caught fire, I would have been barbecued. Anaphylactic shock. I drank almond milk at 6. My face and neck puffed up. I have faint but vivid snapshots of the memories. Staring at the door while my mom fumbled for keys at the doctor's office in my dad's arms waiting for help. 2 fire trucks and an ambulance rushing down the street. Madagascar on the TV. I tried to talk, but nobody would hear. Driving in the ambulance, I was walking out of the hospital that night. In the first Gulf War, I witnessed the USS Princeton and Tripoli both hit a mine within the same 5-hour period, and the shock waves were incredible. So to set the scene, this was within 10 days of the above incidents, which luckily was fatality-free. I was on an RN destroyer. Our mess was at the back of the ship, above the propellers, and also below the waterline. It was roughly 0230, and you had just come off watch. And given the circumstances, you're running off adrenaline, and it's difficult to switch off enough to sleep straight away. I was lying in my bunk and heard a really loud impact, metal on metal, and knew instantly what it was. A mine bounced off the bow, was pushed back against the side of the ship, and came off a third time, getting closer to us. There was no life flashing through your mind. You tried to scream out but couldn't, and you were totally frozen. When nothing happened and I came around, I jumped down off my rack, and as we were wearing white, multi-layer fire protection overalls, always sleep-dressed and boots on, I realized that I and a couple of other guys had literally pissed ourselves. The mine was picked up by a Yank minesweeper, which had a really nasty propeller crease in it. It was a dud. Happy days. A guy bombed onto my head while I was swimming underwater in the shallow end of a pool on purpose because he thought it'd be funny, and my head smashed into the floor. KO'd me instantly, and apparently I was underwater for a few minutes before my dad realized and dived in for me, pulled me out, and performed CPR. My dad promptly kicked the living shit out of the guy, and no one came to his aid because he'd almost just killed an effing 9-year-old. Growing up, our backyard was about 2 acres. Then there was a thin slice of wood and railroad tracks. I was out near the thin slice of wood with our family dog and a BB gun. It had been raining like all the prior week and was still a little wet here and there. My dog walked over what I thought was just some mud. I decided to hop up and get into it for fun. I jumped up, came down, and kept going right on until about my waist. As I scrabbled for solid ground, I hit a big-ass red ant nest. I'm struggling to get out, and also being bit badly by a lot of ants. I hollered for my mom, but she couldn't hear me. So I ended up shooting at the house. It was a BB gun. My mom comes busting out the side door, furious, and then sees or hears me. She came running over to help, but she couldn't pull me out. Her foot ended up going into the mud to her knee, but she managed to pull her leg out. She tells me she's going to get help and runs off and calls 911. Like 10 minutes later, firefighters showed up. My mom was trying to help me the whole time, keep me calm, and get the ants off of me. So the firefighters come running up, and one grabs one side of me, and the other grabs the other. By this point in time, most of the ants had been kicked or hit by my mom and me. These two guys heave up, and I come up to almost my knees, and then they can't pull anymore. As they let up pressure, I'm sucked back down, but this time to my chest. I kind of freak out, and they try to pull me up again, this time to my waist. The same thing happens. I get sucked back down, this time to my neck. My arms are very awkwardly up in the air. One firefighter is lying on his stomach, and his arms are under my armpits at this point, and I just remember him saying he wasn't letting go. I won't let you go. I got you. He tried to pull a little, and I went up a little and down more. Pretty much just my face and hands were above the mud. The firefighter holding me is hollering for a mask. I assume because they thought I was going to go under. I damn sure thought I was dead. The other firefighter that was helping originally ran over and yelled to put this around me. I see a rope come into view, and then it gets out of my arms and around me. They had put it around a tree like a pulley, and then 3 of them pulled while the first one stayed with me. It took almost a half hour to pull me out all the way. It took my shoes, my shorts, my boxers, and anything else I had in my pockets. It fucking hurt. At some points, it felt like my torso was being ripped from my bottom half. I got a bit a few hundred times by ants and got sick from that as well. I didn't go near that area again. That's a harrowing tale, and it's very lucky that you had that BB gun. And I guess you're a good enough shot that you Hit the house hard enough that Mom heard you, so I'm sure she probably forgave you pretty quickly. But, good thinking. Well done. About 15 years ago, I went on a date with my best friend's roommate. We found we didn't have a whole lot in common, so we left it at that. I've always been a bit set in my ways, and there were some lifestyle changes I just wasn't going to make to meet her perception of an ideal guy. To be honest, she came off as a bit too clingy and demanding. About a week later, she went on a date with another guy, and very quickly, they were exclusive. A couple months after that, they have a falling out. She's devastated. He goes over to her place to get his things, and she had her brother and one of his friends there waiting. They beat him up pretty well, then threw him from the 4th-floor balcony. He did survive, but I just think about how close I could have been to being in his shoes. All 3 went to prison. I have no clue where they are today. Working graveyard shift on the rigs, driving back to camp at 7 a.m., pitch black and in a whiteout blizzard, got hit by a double-loaded semi hauling gravel. The airbag didn't deploy. Broken jaw, orbital bone, nose, clavicle, several ribs, couple metacarpals, and fractured sternum. I woke up unconscious, in a snowdrift. Pulled out of a wreck by a couple local First Nation boys who probably saved my life. I was hospitalized for weeks and never went back to the rigs after that. Call it a wake-up call. Somehow purposely falling out of a rafting boat because I couldn't think of other options in such a short time. We were entering a speed zone. The river was quite tight, and we hit a rock. I was on the back right of the raft, which started to get pulled down by the water. My foot was stuck in those shoe holes that you can use as anchors for your legs when paddling. The idea of how I could die flashed before my eyes as the back right where I sat was being pulled down by the water and the weight of the heavy guy next to me. I used my legs to try and push myself out of the shoe hole I was stuck in, and I got out of the raft. The strong current sent me away quickly. I was shortly in a shock of adrenaline and cold water. I quickly went on my back with my feet in front of me, turned around, and quickly swam to the side of the river. I tried to grab the rocks, but they were really slippery. After a few tries, I managed to hold on to one. With the water still trying to push me down the stream, I kept holding on to catch my breath. I looked back at the raft. It was stuck on the rock. I saw the other raft instructor at the end of the strong current, waiting for our raft at a mild spot on the side of the river. They did this to quickly try and help the others if they were to get stuck in the quick water currents part of the river. I tried to climb on the rocks at the side of the river, and they waited for their commands, sign language, as the river made a lot of noise. The instructor that I was with, still trying to balance the raft on the rocks as it was close to slipping off, made a finger walk-like sign, asking me if I could walk, as I had slightly injured my left foot big toe joint. I nodded and proceeded to make a fist on my helmet, meaning I'm okay. The second instructor started to try to come to me. Then he said that I should also try to go to him. I started to walk on the side rocks until he indicated I should wait. The 2 instructors were communicating with sign language. It didn't seem like much, as they both seemed quite confused. I saw a paddle getting close to the second instructor of them, so I waved and pointed at it. He managed to grab it and then climb out of the river. Once he was above me, steep side and a lot of bushes, he would find a way to get to me. About 20 meters further, he was able to come down and help me get off the rocks. My team had finally gotten off the rock that caused all this and proceeded to go to the yellow second raft. I was walking to the yellow raft completely out of the river. I told him what happened, and he completely my quick thinking. I got out of the raft because my foot was stuck and I couldn't climb to the other side to balance it, that I swam to the side and all that. I told him I was actually 15 and had autism. It was an advanced 16-plus rafting tour. He laughed and told me it was all right. Me and my parents and sister, had done rafting 2 times before, which is why we lied about my age, as we really wanted to go to the advanced trip. We got to his yellow raft and I went in. His team had some struggle getting back in the raft as two of them were holding it. The blue raft team, which I fell out of, had left, and shortly after we followed. It was a calm trip from this point, as we had passed the heavy current, got the rafts next to each other, and I hopped back in the blue one since the yellow raft's flooring had been punctured, double layer with air inside, so it was fine, but the raft was very slowly filling with water because of the extra weight. My parents were asking if I was okay, as they were pretty worried, especially my mom. My toe was starting to hurt slightly more, as I was out of the cold water for a while. The river was really calm at this point, and eventually we neared the riverbank. We all got out of the raft and had to pull it out as well. I had to lift it over a small bridge to the other side of the river. The driver was waiting there to pick us up and drive back to the starting point as the trip had ended. A day later, my toe joint had swollen a bit, but was able to be moved. I was completely fine at the end and luckily didn't get injured aside from my toe. Very glad to be alive. This happened 16 days ago on vacation. I almost got shocked to death as a kid. When I was 8, my cousin was washing his car at our grandma's house in Pakistan. The hose was connected to a motor that pumped the water. I thought it would be hilarious to prank him by shutting off the water. Anyone who lives in a third world country knows never to be barefoot around electricity and water. I was barefoot and grabbed the handle to shut off the motor. I instantly got glued to the motor from the current at 220 volts went through my body. I started foaming at the mouth. I would have died had my cousin not come in to check on the water. He grabbed me by the legs and pulled me off. I'm sure he got shocked as well. I'm very grateful for him. In 2003, I was in a major car accident. We drove off the side of the Port Hills in Christchurch, Summit Road at 90 kilometers. We hit the nose first, which made the car flip 12 to 6 end over end until we eventually landed on the road below, about 50 or 70 meters upside down. The lucky thing was that if we slid any further, we would have gone down the next part of the hill, which didn't end until the base of the hill. I remember going unconscious during the roll and seeing the passenger's face get pummeled by broken glass. I woke up after being unconscious and was placed on Arguerny and put into the ambulance. I woke up at about 4 a.m. in the hospital. Today I need a lower spinal fusion, as assessed after the accident by an orthopedic surgeon. It just seems to continue giving me issues each day. I consider myself lucky. I was backpacking in Nepal with my friend in January 2023. One of my top things to do was to take a 30-minute morning flight from Kathmandu to Pokhara so that I could catch glimpses of all the big mountains and spot a couple of 8,000-meter peaks. My friend wasn't so keen, but somehow I got him on board after hyping it up. But he got the whole plan pre-opened by 2 days at the last minute so that he could get home faster. It was an 11-day plan that we could cut short to 9 days. So we flew to Pokhara 2 days before our original date in an ATR-72 plane numbered YT691. It was one of the most scenic flights I've ever taken. That flight, YT691 plane, crashed 2 days later while landing at Pokhara, killing everybody on board. It was the same flight we would have taken had my friend not gotten the trip preponed by 2 days.